This story will cover from then to now and next, all about change, how to turn losers into winners. The wild Mediterranean. Famous in Majorca for this, a kind of wildlife. Buildings. People. But not this. Is that the hotel you booked? Well, sorry about that. Tourism has exploded here and in other Balearic islands like Minorca, fun-loving Ibiza, and another smaller, little-known island, Formentera. And we'll see how changes there are happening and why. Our guides will be little dragons, living dinosaurs if you like. There's one hiding in the flowers close to its potential prey, which is too busy feeding to notice. And then, like lightning, a killer lizard grabs. Repeat it to see the action. On Majorca there are some surprises for tourists. Did they even spot them? Or did the snakes even notice passing tourists? Perhaps they were too busy, fighting or friendly as they were. Off the western end of Majorca lies the nature sanctuary of Dragonera, which is, in fact, the protected home of other reptiles, appropriately little dragons, and also what was in the past a very rare bird, Orduin's gull. In our story about these islands, you'll see how the places, the people and the wildlife are getting on. Some need the heat, being cold-blooded. Others just feel it in a nesting colony. It's cooler right by the sea, where the tourist boats come in. A welcome sight for the local little dragons. And here's why. That picnic lunch from the hotel, so far unexploded, is just a small part of the very mixed menu that these lizards lap up. They are, in fact, in a small way, as interesting as the famous iguana lizards of the Galapagos Islands that Charles Darwin studied in his famous theory of natural selection. Cactus in both places. But today in Majorca, It's a bread roll with lettuce and ham. It seems very popular with these wall lizards, who are quick, agile and very adaptable. Dew will do to wash it down. Now that's a challenge to adaptability. Spanish beer. Could make you fall off the wall if you could get at it. Otherwise it's more bread, veg and anything you can get your tongue to. Below, those Aldwin's gulls move on. Now he's pretty much stuck here on Dragonera off Mallorca. But the seabird and the boat can sail on regardless, onto a really fascinating lizard stronghold. A small Balearic island where the little dragon dinosaurs have an intriguing tale to tell, and so do the gulls too. Just watch him climb. Always on the lookout, an intriguing combination of caution, fear and being inquisitive. He probably recognises the catamaran ferry from Ibiza, which runs often from the infamous Disco Island. And the gulls here too, like the local lizard, well adapted to people, indeed somewhat dependent on them. Part of the wildlife scenery of beautiful Formentera, the baby island of the Balearics, where lizards vary amazingly and thrive amongst fishing boats, large and small. We'll reveal the place with them alongside fishing, farming and tourism. Around the world, fishing methods have changed from small personal boats to huge industrial factory ships. With an increasing human population, fish stocks have crashed in many parts of the ocean, and the once prolific Mediterranean is now an underwater desert in some places. He's seen it all before, at least his ancestors have. This too is part of Formentera's history. Two sorts of very long-legged birds can be seen here, black-winged stilts and flamingos, wading in very salty water, in what some call the White Sea. The flat land in which the salt pans lie and the proximity to the sea facilitated the industry and the trade that followed of this natural condiment, a currency of exchange already in pre-Roman times. The old salt building offers shelter and a good viewpoint for this so adaptable occupant, but it can be a noisy spot. It's also flat, great for getting around, and salt pan birds certainly do that. There's lots of tiny food that can live in this very saline world, and wading into it is the way to go. Some live locally, but at migration time it's a great place to park, rest and refuel. And it's now reinvigorated as a protected place where people and wildlife can enjoy it, parts of it anyway, a natural park. Lizards are included, of course, and scamper around this man-made spot, now reclaimed by nature. Behind which is a somewhat imaginative version of a flamingo. Perhaps pink legs would be more accurate. The seawater was pumped up and then released across the flat land through a series of channels. In summer, the hot sun evaporated out the salt. Nice work if you can get it, and they did, and do so in many other parts of the world, more successfully than this. And back to the sea. And how things have changed in Formentera, as well as seeing flamingos for real or on a wall. Today a lizard might see the tourist version on one of the island's famous beaches. And this is really a sign of the times. And here's another older times. Strange remains linking land and sea. Around Formentera there are several places where these railings still exist. It's a rare sight to see them in action, now that the sea has done its damage. Not easy to put in and maintain, they now provide a sad reminder of the good old days when there were plenty more fish in the sea. Lizards must have seen many fishing boats come and go, to and from the shelter and safety of the shore. Today fishing huts are replaced along the beach by more woodwork, modern signs connecting boardwalks around a lot of the island, which is some 82 square kilometres. From then to now, Formentera has become a favourite for walkers and cyclists. The authorities encourage this, but there's always the temptation to develop and destroy, as has happened in other parts of the Spanish coast, like Mallorca, where our Orduin gull probably came from. Like the lizard, he's relaxed amongst people, and like most gulls, he's always on the lookout for human rejects. But these are not. Fish being dried in the hot wind, the signs that at least some of the fishing boats are still active. But the question must be, how much time and effort was put in to catch this amount? Not so much the fish itself, but the fly interests the lizard below. Possible snack if it comes down. Around the coast are Cala Siona. Now this is a really hot spot for these wall lizards, and that's how they like it. Heat, the sun, controls their very existence. This fisherman's building is a houseful, about to become much busier as the day warms up. But this could be a deterrent. Dogs and cats kill lizards. Perhaps it's a waiting game. The warmth will tempt them out, and the sunbathers too. It's a safe place to live and lay your eggs. But away from the wall it could be dangerous. And And this time it's not the dog, it's another lizard. Lizards can afford to lose their tails, and being territorial, this happens quite often. Oh, forget it. Heading back to the comparative safety of the wall and its surrounding vegetation, and happens to be and attract lizard food. Wall lizards are excellent climbers, whether it's plants or walls, so they can operate at various levels and become very active when they're well warmed up. Now that's a wind-blown seed, and that's a lizard venturing into exposed territory. This is typical for Formentera, dry and rocky with just a few patches of vegetation, which the lizards may eat, or better, with the insects that are attracted to the flowers. It's life on the edge, particularly by midsummer when plants die and the tourists crowd in to enjoy Formentera's classic blue sea. And its wonderful underwater life, like this jellyfish sheltering a small fish, pulsating into sunlight, vital to all life on Earth. And meanwhile, back on the increasingly hot cliff top, they're really getting up to speed now. Hot little dragons. The hummingbird hawk moth has also warmed up well, refueling on the nectar of the flowers shared with the lizards. Not really prey, too big, too fast. What's this bit of food? They're very adaptable and variable too. Different colours in different places. Evolution in action, you could say, in what was and is the Patisic group of islands in the Western Mediterranean. That sea has an amazing history. Some 5 million years ago, upheavals closed the Straits of Gibraltar and the Med evaporated, yes. And it became a dry, salty desert for some 200,000 years. It was then that the ancestors of these wall lizards reached Ibiza and Formentera, which at the time were not islands, but mountains. Yes. When the Straits of Gibraltar reopened and the sea levels rose, these lizards were cut off, allowing them to evolve independently on various islands. As we can see today, a mere blip in that extraordinary story. Thermoregulation, it's called. When the going gets too hot, the lizards go shading. In winter they disappear into the walls. emerging in early March, and by April they're active and everywhere. In the heat of summer, they have to keep cool at times, like people in fact. As the tourist book says, today the challenge is to rationally and efficiently balance tourism with conservation of the island's rich natural heritage. Quite so. There is this, and this, and this. The length of the island, and 19 kilometres, that's 12 miles long. At a place where a seasonal river enters the sea, there are signs of times past when fishing flourished. It's now a quiet, almost derelict spot where the only activity is that of our friend the wall lizard. Food could be an insect or the flower that it's attracted. In fact, the lizard helps pollinate like an insect as it moves from flower to flower across this jumble of nautical stuff. Here's a bit of a surprise. It's hard work, this job, maintaining the railings, the weather often rough at times, and they're threatened by greedy, much bigger boats offshore, and an ecosystem increasingly at risk these days as catches dwindle. The sun is so essential to these lizards, and indeed the summer tourists on both land and in and on the sea. This sunlit underwater meadow is Posidonia, actually a flowering plant, also known as the source of life. It can help the livelihoods of fishermen and feed tourist restaurants, perhaps in a paella. More good news, it protects beaches from erosion, but the bad news is it can spoil them from tourists, piling up banks of rotting vegetation. It actually has roots, stems and leaves, like a land plant, and boats are strongly warned not to damage these seagrass prairies with their anchor chains. This may spoil the beach for tourists though. At the same time protecting it from erosion and being a fertiliser on poor soils. Some natural, like a part of a cuttlefish, or much less so, everlasting plastic, or a fisherman's legacy. There are flies to be found amongst the rubbish. food. Ants contain formic acid, but they are possible lizard food. Plenty of them on their way home. Harvester ants, helping distribute seeds. At home at last, but there's a problem. Putting the bins out, sort of, straight to the rubbish tip with unwanted bits. Perhaps this is where those seeds came from. Along the concrete cavity wall comes another seed searcher. In fact, a rat will eat most things, including lizard eggs, hidden below in this more modern kind of wall. From salt lagoons to fishing, to farming, and next, well, tourism perhaps, with the risks it can bring. For millions of years, the lizards of Ibiza and Formentera have seen many changes through their changing environment. This one, with bell attached, is a tough customer, enduring great heat in its wool in the summer and surviving on vegetation that dries up to almost nothing as early as June. Their seeds will carry these plants through to next March, when the lizards emerge from the walls to start another season in a harsh place with dangers more fatal than sheep. Cats catch blackbirds. Blackbirds catch lizards. And as the life-affirming sun rises again, the blackbird sunbathes in the rough farm road, where nocturnal activity is revealed. Snails, in their varied patterns, have safely but very slowly crossed the farm road, and with rather improbable eyes on stalks, are searching for something when they eventually arrive. Cat permitting. They're hermaphrodite, having both male and female sexual organs. There can be a problem with right-sided and left-sided mating. From Spain, a mismatch was solved by bringing together Lefty from England with Righty, Tomo, from Mallorca, not far from here, and they produced 170 young. Farming in the Balearics, as here in Formentera, has moved on a bit. It's tough with thin soil and lots of rock and roll as tourism grows, replacing tractors with Ferraris and expensive yachts. The life of Formentera is being transformed, and so may the farmers, as the island looks to the future. And here comes more trouble, to where the future trouble for the whole island may be seen. Except there are strong moves in the other direction. For example, at El Calo, its layout explained for all to see, with easy access to the shore. A natural ecosystem, very fragile, high value. Please take care of the coast. This information plus boardwalks show the local concern to protect places which elsewhere in the Mediterranean would be covered in concrete and polluted to bits of plastic. It was feared that Pujols would be developed and damaged. Could that still happen? Not only do the boardwalks help walkers to see the shore and get to the beautiful beaches easily, but they keep people away from the sand dunes, home to sunbathing lizards that can shelter in a vital grassy jungle down there. And it's not just any old grass, it's called marram grass. It has curled-in stems like little tubes that retain moisture, and it helps bind the sand dunes together. From down here, people are tall but not threatening, though in the past many of these special lizards were taken for the pet trade, and it's now illegal. And their main problem could be their next-door neighbours. So at Pujols, will it be walkers, cyclists, swimmers, hippies, nudists and sunbathers like lizards? Or more, even much more of this? In part 2, you can see how lovely unspoilt Formentera and its famous natural beaches face the future. It's a story about stories, but with an E. And our reptilian friends will see it all.